Welcome to the Multifamily Zone, where business meets family. We explore what the entrepreneur life looks like from the family perspective. Now here are your hosts, Julia and Gino Barbaro.
Hey everyone, this is Julia Barbaro, host of the Multifamily Zone podcast. I am here with the co-founder of Jake and Gino, my husband and co-host, Gino Barbaro.
You nailed it on the first time. Good job. So I'm holding up this book in my hand right now. So how do I parent this child? We have the great luck and fortune of having the co-authors of this book on today. But my first question before I get into their bio, I've been parenting over 20 years and I still have that question every day when I get up. Am I doing the right thing? And I think they're going to dive into it. Today's guests are a brother and sister duo who have teamed up to help us understand the difference between producing a product and parenting a person. Together, Bill Hendricks and Bev Hendricks Godby have created a comprehensive look at how to identify giftedness and help your child discover it for themselves. Welcome to the show, Bill and Bev. How you guys doing?
Thank you.
We're doing great.
We're doing great.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. My first question, who's the better parent out of both of you?
Well, that's easy that hands down, Bev is. There's no question about that.
I don't know about that.
I need you guys to expand a little bit on that question because
That's a hard thing to answer.
I tried to really hold on to the wise woman builds her house. So it's a present tense. So I just think it's always happening, always. So if you really messed up yesterday, there's always today.
Love that.
So I think God's really gracious that way.
Love that.
So I like
the reason I say she's the better parent, let's just do the math. Which way does it go when we get down to the question, okay, I'm in a fix here as a parent. I need some advice. Does she turn to me or do I turn to her? And 90% of the time I turn to her. All right.
So
that tells you everything you need to know.
I love the definition because that just ruled me out as the better parent. So there you go, Joel. You win by default.
You don't need to ask.
you don't have to worry about it anymore, Gina.
Well, the one time in her life when she actually did turn to me and with some angst about maybe you can shed some light on this. Hope I'm not telling stories out of school here, Bev.
Well, you always do. So go right
Let's
ahead.
just say she had a child who was in college but had not had a good experience, and the child was singing the blues about it, but more importantly the parents were singing the blues about it. And Bev said to me, we just don't know what to do. This is not good. And I raised the subject of giftedness with her. And that really led into an experience of Bev and me working together in our consulting practice, the Giftedness Center.
I love that.
That was the question that I had is being siblings. It's unusual to see siblings write a book together, work together because
a lot of fighting going on.
There can be.
This seems to be what we hear from I can't imagine writing that with my brother. Kind of thing.
Especially if one of you is more dominant than the other.
Well, we won't go there. But I do think it's a real privilege. Bill, and I were the last two of four kids. And actually, I think I discovered him when he was a senior in high school. And I happened to be back from college and we had all these great discussions. And I thought, wow, he's so bright and he has so much to offer. And then years later, he invited me into this practice of the Giftedness Center, that's what we call it, where we kind of help people to identify what is the thing that you're here to do, and then make choices that kind of really cooperate with that. And it's just been great. We've been together for 20 years doing that, but we operate kind of independently in our practice, but we work together on projects. So in a way, we've kind of learned to trust each other a lot, and our conversations just continue about giftedness. I think anytime you put us in a room, that's what we're going to talk about. So
I love that. So I'm going to ask the better parent the question first. Bev, what is your purpose as a parent? And then Bill can answer that. What really is the essence or the true purpose of a parent?
I feel like it's to shine a light on my children. I want to be the person that they always say, Mom always believed in us. Mom knew us. And that changes. I now have adult children. So when they become adults, they obviously become their own people and they change. And I think too many parents keep them in that space that they remembered them when they were 5 or goodness with girls 16 or something. And you don't allow them to really change or be that parent with the building remarks all the time as they move forward, whether they're doing it right or wrong. A wise friend of mine told me that when they get to be adults, you just zip it a lot of the time. And I think it's more what you don't say. And then when you do say, to think, what am I adding here? So.
It's a challenge, Bev. We have our daughter is 20. She'll be 22 in a couple days. She stayed home for college. And there was a moment where I thought, oh my gosh, do I tell her to do chores? Is she supposed to? It was so, like you said, you're not sure what to say, what not to say, or what to talk about with her, because she's also going through that as well as an adult living at home. It's very challenging. And I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of things like, man, I should have done this instead. And there's a lot of growth there. And I think we should encourage that growth and encourage that time where you do mess up and go to them, be like, I think I should have done this instead. I apologize. Can we work on this?
So I think that's the piece, is really, if you've paved the way with that kind of mutual respect for one another, when they get older, you recognize now they're trying out their wings. So I'm not in control anymore. Actually, that felt like a real relief to me.
100%.
3 girls.
I loved it.
It was just like, oh, thank you, Jesus, for this part,
I agree with you.
So all the best to you. I'm sure she's lovely.
So Bev, what I'm trying to speak about business on this podcast, because I'm the business guy, and it's always about relationships. So looking at it from my business lens, parenting is almost like being an entrepreneur. You're committing, then figuring it out, making the mistake, pivoting, learning from it. And every child is different. So every experience is different and every interaction is different. And we're constantly learning. If you don't have that growth mindset, if you're not able to change, your business is going to die and your relationship with your family is going to die. I didn't mean to take that up. I want Bill's answer to that question, because I know that he's there pondering. He's looking at me going, I'm ready to take this one on, Gino. So give me a chance.
I love entrepreneurs. And to some extent, I am one, but I've worked with tons of them. And so everything you just said, I totally agree. The one quarter twist I'd put on it is there is a piece, and I'm coming at this from our sort of technical consulting practice. When we identify an entrepreneur, one of the big things we see in them, the crude way to put it is, these are people who frankly can't work for anybody else. So they have to work for themselves, right? Which means what the entrepreneur does is they have a vision, and they create expectations on accomplishing that vision. They sell that vision and people buy that. And so in that sense, they've now committed themselves, and they want to stay in control of the process by which we deliver those results, because their name is on the line, right? The quarter twist, when you become a parent, though, the word I'd introduce is the word steward. What you're really doing is a steward. And there's a real sense in which you can't bring your own vision and say, this child is going to turn out this way. What you've been handed is a person, and that personhood, frankly, has already been determined. I know it's hard to believe, and not everybody will buy this. This is our view based on a lot of factors. But right there on the weighing table, what you've got is an infant person. Now, obviously, they're going to grow and they're going to develop, and a lot's going to happen. But basically, as a parent, you've been given, as Bev said, this gift of this person. And like a person, they come home and they begin to manifest how they engage the world. And what you do to steward that personhood is you watch, you make observations. How does this little one engage the world? Over time, you start to see there's a very signature way they have of doing that. And you try to begin to honor that and work with that. And put some boundaries around it. But the last thing you want to do is say, I've got big dreams for how my kid's going to turn out. And then you impose that on them. They may turn out the way you intended, but believe me, they will not be healthy, happy people.
It's interesting, Bill, because my husband tends to be like that naturally. He's like, this is, Sophia, so she's 15 years old. This is what you need to do. You need to get your real estate license. And he'll just name it all. And the two of us kind of look at each other and smile.
She's pulling up.
And it's so funny to me.
Bill, she power washed the deck yesterday. She's out looking at Zillow. She's going to open houses. I'm not promoting that. She's sending me listings on Zillow to buy homes. I'm just saying.
We love you.
And dude, I can't wait, because if I can start buying homes with her and flipping, that is like my dream.
That's my point. point is that it's so hard because you do see things. And that's what I want to get into is that what's the best way as a parent or even as an adult, because we do have influences on other people's children,
right?
Especially nieces, nephews that come over and they see, and there's something about the way we parent that they respect and they want. So what can we do as a parents? Because it's a challenge not to be like, yeah, I could see this in you. You got to go for it.
Yeah.
So what do we do? What's the best way that we help the kids discover their gifts and support that?
Well, one of the things I think is so important to keep in mind is the way you each do it is through your own lens of giftedness. You do all of life through that lens, and it makes all the sense in the world to you. But your child may or may not be like you. They may not see things like you. They may not value the same things that you do. And so I think humility is a really important ingredient here. But I always say, if you can be curious and not critical,
I like that.
Listen to them and kind of think, that's an idea. Like with Sophia, I would put a lot of energy behind that. I mean, she's putting energy in. You just follow the energy. We always say, follow the joy, follow the energy. Oh. But when it's now your project and you're doing it, that's when you have to kind of put some guardrails up and think, I need to let this be hers, so that the more you can do that, and maybe she'll shift by 16 and is into something else, is into the baking show. Yes. You don't know. So,
well, yeah, the subtle thing is that often you'll see something in your child that's very much like you do life. And that feels really familiar. But as Bev said, you have to have a degree of humility. Yeah. Because sometimes you'll see a similar behavior, and yet behind that behavior, we have this thing called motivation. And what is driving that behavior turns out to be a different motivation than what drives your behavior. So you see a kid that's power washing a deck, and you're thinking, man, this is great. All the different ways we could use that, and make money off of that and so forth.
I feel like that you were here.
That's
your mind, okay?
Your energy and what matters to you. Yeah.
I don't know Sophia, obviously, but I have seen cases like this. And then I asked Sophia, well, man, I understand you had a great time washing the deck the other day. And they're like, oh, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Well, what'd you love about it? I just loved the feel of that tool, man. I was getting that dirt out of there, and I loved, getting it clean and working with that machinery, and it had nothing to do with any visions for making money.
I think the trickier thing is when they show things or show energy in things that you don't appreciate, that you don't understand or you don't like. And that's when the shaming piece can come in, that we really guard parents against, because shame is a killer of joy, intrinsic motivation. And we see a lot of that in people that we see, as adults. But I always say, again, curiosity, what is it you love about that? Try to go in through their door. And also, I would say, develop positive language for the things that are not you. Those are usually the things you back up from, or things that are not at all you. So an example, one of my twins was always very quiet. And I referred to her actually as slow to warm up. And I now look back on that and I think, that's kind of a deficit model, she's not doing something. So I would want now to say she takes the time she needs to feel comfortable, and explain that to someone else that might be, looking at her weird. It's like, that's her, that's what she does. And that also helps you, I think, to kind of recognize that's her. And I don't want to, slime that. I want to respect that.
Right.
I want everyone that's listening to write these down, because it's important. Be curious, not critical. That's the first thing. The second thing is follow the joy. And the third thing is follow the energy. Now, Bill said something to me before we started the recording, and I want him and Bev both to expand upon it, because it's really, really important. I think this is the essence here, where a lot of us get caught up. The child is not a product. He or she is a person. I want you all to write that down also, and really meditate and pray about that, because it's important. A child is not a product. He is a person. Can you expand upon that a little bit, Bill, what your thoughts are?
Sure. The dominant model of parenting in our culture, which has been there for some time, is that a child is a product. The idea is you bring this kid home from the hospital, and then you as a parent, your job is to parent that child meaning to love on it, to socialize it, to educate it, to give it the right lessons, get it the right friends, give it the right environment, pour all this stuff into it so that when that child becomes an adult, how they turn out, and turn out, of course, is a kind of a manufacturing industrial term. How they turn out is a referendum on how well you did as a parenting job. But the problem is the child is not a product. As I said, the child comes to you as a person. That little infant person right there on the weighing table, is now handed over to you. You're entrusted with that little person. And I believe our job, I use the word steward, our job is to steward that little infant person into the adult person that they were intended to be. The reason we use the term giftedness is because giftedness in its simplest definition is it's what you're born to do. Everybody's born to do something. And giftedness manifests itself as a pattern of behavior. So for one person, they basically look at life as a problem to be solved. They never met a problem they didn't want to solve. They love to solve problems. Somebody else, it's all about understanding something at a very deep level. Somebody else, it's about building something and getting a finished product. Somebody else, it's about gaining a response, getting people to respond to you and influencing their behavior. We can go on and on and on about all the different kinds of giftedness that there are. But the little infant has that gift in there. And as they get older and they get more sophisticated in their abilities and so forth, they begin to express that gift in all kinds of different ways. And your job as a parent, I believe, is to try to steward that little child so that they grow to discover their gift and celebrate their gifts, and then begin to express them in more sophisticated ways so that by the time they get to be an adult, like they know who they are, they have confidence, strengths, they have a sense of direction and purpose because they can see how they can make a contribution to the world. And they become the adult version of who they were born to be.
I love that.
One of the words in the subtitle of the book is about discovering. And that's why I like to think about every child we get as its own art treasure that is already made. It's a masterpiece, no matter how it comes. And it's for you. So there's both of you in this. There's a dyad that's happening. But in order for you to understand anything or discover anything about this art treasure, you're going to have to be present and you're going to have to observe at first. They don't have a lot of ways to tell you. But what you also want to do is try, once you begin to discover who this child is set up an environment for their flourishing. And you've got 6 kids. So that is 6 different ways of thinking about doing this, which is very complex. I would give you all the credit in the world. I had a set of identical twin girls, which was my own little,
challenge.
Well, yeah, exactly. Talk about a learning curve. They looked identical, but they were not. And so I had to always be thinking, the world saw them as the same. They were not the same, and how to honor that in each one of them was really important to me.
I've got this question here. I'm trying to still figure out what my gifts are. I just got lucky. I married an amazing wife. And what are my gifts? Not really sure. How do you figure out what your child's gifts are?
Well, Bev said that phrase, follow the energy.
Yes.
Giftedness, combination of ability, but also motivation. And that motivational energy turns out to be a lot of along with the ability, turns out to be a real clue. And so let's start at infant stage. That little baby has very few ways to really express themselves other than to cry and move their eyes and eventually their hands and pretty soon their feet. But I mean, it's pretty primitive. And yet every mother can tell you, if you pay attention, you'll notice that child's eyes keep coming back to certain things. And they cry at certain times and in certain ways, and they seem to respond to certain people or certain pets, or they move toward. It's like they want to move towards something. Okay, well, that just gets more sophisticated as the little kid starts to stand up and be a toddler. Certain toys they come back to again and again. Certain little activities they come back to again and again. I got a note from a friend of mine who knows about this process, and she couldn't be more excited. Her little 2-year-old, she said, he spent 2.5 hours this afternoon stacking boxes inside of each other and then taking them back out and doing that all over again. Now, we don't know what that means. Well, all we know is that kid seemed to be absorbed in that activity, which is the telltale sign that something about that activity overlapped with their giftedness. And it goes on as the kids get older. Do they want to be more with friends and do things with other kids? Do they seem to be more like do it by myself or maybe with just one other kid? Are there certain stories they come back to again and again in their imagination? Are there certain roles that they want to play again and again, or certain scenes that they want to play out again and again? And so you observe, where's this child's energy going? They keep coming back to what holds their attention for a long time. What, when they're seemingly out of it, suddenly galvanizes them and springs them into action. Again, you don't want to jump to conclusions. All you want to do when they're early in their life there is just make those observations. But if you keep track of them, like we suggest keeping a simple journal, over 6, 8, 10 years, you've got this massive amount of data evidence, and it begins to point toward patterns of behavior in the child's life.
So you want to do key KPIs, key performance indicators. You want, if you can't measure it, then you can't manage it, right? So you can't be this person that says, just pick out one thing. If you're really measuring something, this is facetious a little bit, but really think about it. If you're really looking at your child, because you can have your things, like I said, I'm only looking at what Sophia likes as opposed to what I like. So maybe I'm only seeing that, but if I'm looking at it in its totality and I'm keeping a journal for the next few years, the journal won't lie. My mind may lie, but that journal will not lie.
Well, and Sophia can't lie about
That's right.
it.
You're right.
She will tell you. So like I would say also engage her about this.
Be curious. I like that you said that before. Be curious.
Yeah, just like ask her about what she loves about it. Get her input. And before again, I always encourage parents, before you spend, $1,000 on gymnastics for, an 8-year-old, make sure that is something they're going to want to do. Exactly. Rather than, well, I just saw him do this two things, and now I think, this is going to be the next Simone Biles,
Bev, one of the things that I've heard parents say, and I've watched it the 20 years as a parent, is we want what we always wish we had.
Exactly.
Right? So if I wanted to be in gymnastics my whole life, my kids are going to be in gymnastics because I missed out on it. And unfortunately, a lot of parents do live through their children and give them what we miss out on. And it's so important that, like you said, to be present, be observant, see what they like, and ask them. We always talk about communication. Sometimes we forget to communicate with them and actually listen to what they have to say. Because most of the times we're talking and being like, well, this is what you're going to love doing. When you get older, you are going to be great at blah, blah. And we just give them what we think. And a lot of them, my husband included, he had a restaurant because his parents had a restaurant. And he did it for his dad because that's what they do. That's what they knew.
That was the family thing.
Yes,
that's what we
exactly.
Did, right?
And my son was ready to take on the restaurant when he was so disappointed. He's like, what do you mean you're selling? Isn't that a family business? What's going on?
Best day of my life when we sold.
But we do that, unfortunately, as parents, is we try to live through our kids. We try to give them the best that we think. And we do forget to be just present and just pay attention and don't talk so much.
Let me say one thing.
So good. Go ahead.
No, as far as the restaurant, it wasn't the best day of my life when I left. It was just one of those things. My father passed away in 2007. And when you're 7 years old and you live through it and you're raised through it and you're in the kitchen working with him, it's just, I love that aspect of it because I had such a great relationship with him and I worked with him. And then when he left, I had that question, am I building his dream to continue or am I building my own dream? So everyone out there, that's a real struggle as you're becoming an adult. I know a lot of students who come to the Jake and Gino community who are really super smart, a lot smarter than I will ever be. They're attorneys, they're doctors, and they look and they say to themselves, I don't know why I'm a lawyer. I freaking hate it. Well, was your parents? And then they'll look back and go, well, my dad wanted me to go down this route. So I challenge everybody listening. If you're a parent, don't do that to your child. And if you're in that situation, reflect upon your life. You've got the ability to stop and to say, I want a timeout. I want to reset. Don't be afraid, because that's the opportunity in life to say to yourself, wow, I don't like this path I'm going on. Create a plan. I created a plan. It took me years to do what I'm doing now, but I said to myself, I don't like what I'm doing. What can I do next? And I went on and got life coaching, and life coaching transformed my life. I started asking those difficult questions. So for you parents out there, beware. You don't want to push your kids into that, because then ultimately your kids will resent you for doing that. So just
well, Gina, that's really where I was going to go. You had raised that great question earlier. and how do I find out about my own giftedness?
Mm-hmm.
And we really start in this whole thing by challenging parents before you go to the trouble of discovering your child's giftedness. There's a fairly simple process to begin to discover your own, okay? And it's what we use at the Giftedness Center. It's a process of telling certain kinds of stories and then looking for patterns in those stories. This is really where the book came from. When people come to us, we ask them to make a list of what we call giftedness stories. And a giftedness story is about an activity that you've done in life that you enjoyed doing the activity. You gain satisfaction from it. All the way back into childhood to the
just like the one you just started.
Just like the one you.
I wanted to hear it. That's how I knew it was a giftedness story. You started talking about your dad in the restaurant, and I know if we took you back to a moment, you would tell us a story that would reveal, if we connected it with the other stories, this is who you are.
The way we know that's connected with your giftedness is your whole energy level went up about 100 times
100%.
right there. Okay. Yeah. And as soon as you said, and then when my dad died, you could feel it coming down. You know, it's like, it wasn't about the restaurant, it was about something else there.
Exactly.
But the point is, you tell a series of those stories to a partner and you get into the details of what you did and how you did it, not why you did it. We just want to see you in action. You know, what abilities did you use? What were you working with and through? What roles did you play? And what was satisfying about that activity? You get about 8, 10, 12 of those stories, and you get the evidence from those stories, those words you used, you will start to see that there's a pattern. And it will point to the main things about your core giftedness. We have that exercise in the back of a previous book that I wrote back in 2014 called The Person Called You, Why You're Here, Why You Matter, and What You Should Do with Your Life. And in the back of that book is that storytelling exercise. We also have that a copy of that on our website for the Giftedness Center. So if you go to thegiftednesscenter.com, there's a link in there for discovering your giftedness, a step-by-step guide. In our book, So How Do I Parent This Child? We start by saying, parents, go to the trouble. It's not going to take you long. It's a fun exercise. Figure out your giftedness so you'll have a framework from which to work.
But one, like, piggyback on what you just said, Gino, because I think it was really important about parents tend to see themselves in their children, and then they want to, like, almost wholesale have them become whatever that is, whatever
that's
they
the product
value. And that's a problem, because that's a person you just ran into, and you can't just take who you are and put it into this child, nor should you. It's really kind of dishonoring the gift of that child. But I do think that it kind of, raises another question, which is, so what are you thinking that this is about? And back to what we talked about, performative. So often people want to say, well, my kid's going to Harvard, my kid's doing this, and it's really about them feeling 100%. Good about themselves and feeling like they accomplished something, rather than really thinking about, what is that child experiencing from me?
I have a real big question, and this happens very often, and especially just as in personal in your own mind. When is it too late, or is it ever too late? Because we have a 7-year-old and we have a 22-year-old. And sometimes I think back and I'm like, oh, I should have done this, and the other thing. I failed. I messed up. What do we do in that situation? Because that happens, and we're always going to. We can never be the perfect mom. We can never, always be there for the kids as well as we could have at the time. What do we do in that situation?
That's why we had 6 kids, because we knew the first couple were going to be screwed up.
You were trying to get it right.
I have to tell you, time out. Our oldest just left for a year. She's a missionary with Life Teen in Georgia. I just sometimes I think, how did that happen?
Yeah, same here.
I think you just said it, which is give up the idea of perfection.
Yes.
You're not going to be it. You're going to be who you are. Right. And so you want to be the best of that. And that's good and bad. And we talk in the book about being, it's not our word. A person named Winnicott came up with this, but the good enough parent. And what the good enough parent is a parent that's plugged in, that's paying attention, that's listening to their child, able to also acknowledge when they have failed. and step in and kind of say that. I'll never forget my own father said that to me. And it was actually a moment of clarity, because it's like I wanted to protect him from even thinking that. But in a way, me being able to say, Dad, you were a good enough parent for me. You gave me so much. And then reiterating what that is, that gave us such a conversation that was really sweet.
Julia, to answer your question, it's never too late to begin to help your child begin to discover their giftedness. The process that we use at the Giftedness Center, that storytelling process, we actually don't start with anybody before about age 17. Okay. So most of the people we're working with are from college age on up. When I say on up, I mean, we've worked with people in midlife. We've worked with retirees. A couple summers ago, I worked with a guy that was in his 80s.
Oh, nice.
The giftedness is there. We always like to discover as early in life as we can, because it helps the person avoid so many dead ends and
make choices.
And they make better choices. If you've got a child that's 22, I mean, gosh, that's half our practice is people in their 20s. Now it's out of that we said, well, wait a minute. If the giftedness is there from birth, why do we have to wait 18 years before somebody discovers it? Because all of these adult clients that we've had over the years, just to put that in perspective, we estimate between the two of us work with about 4,500 individual people. Okay. So we've heard thousands of stories, and so many of those stories are from childhood. And those stories are really important, because it's like you get the purest expression of this person's giftedness before they got old enough to get feedback from people that's basically taught them they need to kind of edit how they live. They need to hide certain things or not do certain things. You know how our world does that. So this is just little 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds just innocently living out that giftedness and all that joy coming out. And we thought, wow, for parents who have so much anxiety about raising their kids, they're seeing in real time the giftedness of these children just being lived out in front of them. If they knew what to look for, they could actually discover some of this stuff early on, which would then enable them to help their children wake up to their gifts, but also they could tailor their parenting to fit the bent of the child.
This book is also very healing as far as reading it and looking back on your childhood, because just like Bev said, I'm thankful that my mom was who she was. She messed up quite often, and so did my dad. Yes. But you know what? I'm an adult. I make the decisions now. And too many of us blame our parents for the way we are. We blame our parents for our failures as an adult and our bad decision making. And I think at some point it's time to stop.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I mean, when people are stuck and they need to see a therapist or whatever, obviously that's their work. But I kind of think about, how do you reframe it and say, what did you get from this parent? What were they able to give you? And what also have you learned as a result? Because I know that things that I saw that I wanted to be, I was sometimes able to do it, but many times I was not any better than what I received, and that was humbling for me. We always think we're going to be that parent that kind of makes all of the things that were wrong, we're going to be great at those things. Right. And it's a fantasy. We're going to be, at best a good enough parent, but we're going to be asking for forgiveness a lot.
Absolutely.
What I like about the giftedness idea is we all want to ultimately live our soul purpose, and I think giftedness gets you to your soul purpose, what your essence is. And I think that's very important, everybody. What I wanted to ask you, my last question before we wrap everything up here, how does your book compare to other books on child rearing? And before you answer that, I've got my own 2 cents on it. It's a book where it's counterculture. And what I love about it is what everyone else is doing, we want to do the opposite basically of it. So we're most of the people, listening, not our listeners, but most of the people out there are treating their children as products and not as persons. That emanates through what you guys are speaking. How else is it different? Because it's so important for people to really stand up to what their values are and, parent the kids the way they want to, instead of listening to what the culture is telling us to do.
I would say that, people, again, back to what I said about information overload. I just think there's so much out there, and parents can easily become discouraged. They can become depressed. They can feel like they can never live up to this. Whatever resources you want to read in order to help you be a better parent, child rearing. We don't claim to be people that are about child rearing. All those kind of potty training, feeding, that sort of thing. What we're about is the person. So we're about, like, read all the books that you want to, resources that are helpful, but first of all, and primarily read the child. And that is a very different way of looking at this whole enterprise.
I love that answer.
I want both of you to give us the big message you want all the listeners to just remember and to get out of this podcast as they're listening.
And the book.
And definitely go get the book. So How Do I Parent This Child? But both of you give your message to the listeners.
All right. The message I would give is to realize your child truly is unique. I'm not saying that in the way parents go, oh, my child's special. Of course, your child's special. Your babies were the most beautiful babies that ever, I get that. No, we are representing that every single human being on this planet is a unique creature. There's nobody else quite like them, or ever has been, or ever will be. Okay. And that's what makes our book so different, is it's not a methodology of parenting as if a one size fits all. It's saying, pay attention to the uniqueness of that person that you've been given, because that's the trump card. That will determine pretty much everything of what works and what doesn't work. The more you can kind of get into the uniqueness of how this person does life, the better shot you have at doing what's meaningful for them.
Well, and that's great, Bill. I'm all about part of the parent. And so I would say that mostly I would want it to be an encouraging, kind of joyful message. And Wendell Berry has this one line in one of his poems where he says, what we need is here. And I would say, you are here on purpose, for purpose. And right now in front of you is part of that great purpose. And that child has come into the world in this space and time and has been handed for you to steward and enjoy and love on. No matter what is or feels like is not here, all you need is here. And to pay attention to that and listen for what it is that the purpose is for you in this space and time.
I love that. And it's such a message, what you just said. God put us all here right now, in the place where we are in the time of history right now with reason and purpose. And he has a plan for us if we just trust
and has a plan for that child.
Yes, each one of us. Absolutely. And it's hard because out of a parent, sometimes we just get controlling. We need to let go of that control. Let go.
I'm not a control person.
Oh, okay.
If I was a control
person,
person,
because he's so not controlling in a bad way.
I would not be able to have 6 kids
and
if
I'm
I was
not.
a controlling person.
So it's very funny.
So
you look like you'd be a fun dad to me.
That's right.
Yeah.
He has great ideas. He's the one that comes in. He works all day long, comes in, he's like, all right, guys, let's go to the beach. And I'm like, really?
How many girls? How many boys?
We have 5 girls and 1 boy. Our
son.
son.
Going to say there's going to be a monument in the backyard to you. Having had 3 girls, it's always the dad.
Absolutely.
He can do no wrong.
There is lots of love in our house. Absolutely.
Lots of prayers for you, Julia.
Thank you.
Well, Bill, you know what our job is, right? Our job is as men to our daughters. My daughter left me a really nice note, is I want my daughter to marry someone like me. Someone
Absolutely.
Love her, someone who's going to cherish her, someone who's going to protect for her, someone who's going to provide for her, someone who's going to put her up on a pedestal and listen to her. That's what our job is. It's funny what you just
said is that I want my daughter. And I think it's funny because I always hear when he says, I want Gabriella to do this, this, and this. I'm like, that's nice.
But it came through. She left me a beautiful note. And what I loved about it is
I just want her to be loved.
Yes, but I want her to marry somebody who's really going to take care of her. And that I want it to be the role model.
We have a lot of fun conversations.
She's still right here.
How did you add in there cook great food?
Yes. all my girls can cook really, really good. It's pretty impressive, I have to tell you.
Where can the listeners get a hold of you guys?
At our website for www.thegiftednesscenter.com.
Awesome. Well done.
I love that.
You want to wrap it up? Or
I am so impressed. This podcast was so eye-opening, and I'm so thankful that we had you on, because so many of us need to hear this message, because we do also forget. And I want to put that out there, is that yes, sometimes we read a book and we apply what we've learned, And the years go on and we slowly forget. And all of a sudden we're like, oh, kids, you don't like that. You like this. We always have to be reminded, and we have to relearn things over and over. And so this has helped me.
I'm so glad.
I'm so thankful.
It's a real privilege. Thank you so much for having us.
A couple of notes. I just want to repeat a couple of things.
Sure.
I want to write again. Once again, be curious, not critical. That's very important for parents. A child is not a product. They are a person. I got to keep hammering that because that's important. Yeah. That's such an important idea, topic, and follow the joy and follow the energy. And one of the biggest takeaways is being humble, having the humility, having to know when you need to keep your mouth shut and need to keep your child and let them
and keep
grow.
your ears open. That's a big deal too.
And Gino, there's a second website, a web address I want to give you, because we're setting up a means for parents who want to keep a journal actually online. For some people, that's just an easier way to do it.
Yes.
And so that's going to be at giftedness.co/parenting. So giftedness.co/parenting.
We'll have those in the show notes so people can click on them.
We just want to thank you guys for spending the afternoon with us once again. So how do I parent this child? It is on Amazon and it's eye-opening. And there's work involved, everybody. It's not just by reading the book. It's about applying the principles and working on yourself. And don't be afraid to work on yourself and put in that effort. So just want to thank you once again.
And have fun with it.
Yes. Don't forget the joy. Bring the joy back into the parenthood.
The joy and the pain, especially with Gino and Julia. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.